one in the middle, not the average. Average is driven up by really wealthy people. The median income was $2,000 a year lower after inflation than it was the day I left office. 2/3 of the American people were living effectively on less money while health care costs had doubled and college costs had gone up 75%. So this inequality, which has gripped us and virtually every other society, is a big problem. The instability is a big problem. And the final big problem we have is that the whole economic model that we've been living with is no longer sustainable because of climate change. Big story in the New York Times today, the military recognizes that global warming is a national security threat to the United States. When Al Gore and I said that in 1998, they thought we were 3 bricks shy of a full load. That it is, and you can see it. You go to Australia, they don't have the political debates you see in the Congress here. You don't have the liberals and conservatives fighting in Australia. You know why? They're awash in forest fires and their agricultural land is drying up. They're the first continent to be hit full in the face with the consequences of the warming climate. And they're all just scrambling around. My foundation works there trying to figure out how to bury carbon dioxide so that it won't come up, and whether we can build huge solar power generating systems in the deserts in Australia. But I see this. So we live in a great world. It's really interesting, but it's unequal, it's unstable, and it's unsustainable. And almost every problem on that statistical list, going from worst to first, can be explained in terms of the negative aspects of Florida's interdependence. You were not organized or invested in a way that would enable you to tap the God-given capacities of these young people in a positive way. And no reason to hang your head. Most other places aren't either. But it is as predictable a consequence of the modern world as lots of the other things I see. I'll give you another example. My foundation works in Ethiopia. They have like most places, the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, is a sophisticated place. The healthcare minister there is a really able person. I would be honored if he were in my government. If I were in office, he's really great. And he asked us to come in and help him. And so we got the AIDS medicine there, and we noticed that people were still dying. And it wasn't hard to figure out why. Ethiopia has 80 million people, and 60% of them live in villages of less than 1,000. And if my numbers are right, that means there have to be a minimum of 48,000 villages, and there are really a lot more because a lot of these villages are 500 people. And outside the capital city, they had only 700 health clinics. So if you guys know anything about AIDS, you know you got to test people to see if you're HIV positive, and you got to give medicine. You got to test to see if the medicine's working. If it's not, you got to go back to change it. So, but those kids living out there in the countryside, they're just as smart as the ones living in the capital city. Don't they have the same right to life? Sure. But what happens? They don't have the systems and the structures and the investment patterns necessary to tap the talents of all their children. This is a global problem. Hardly anybody is well organized for the world we're living in. And Florida's attractiveness, its thriving vitality, has given you more folks who come here looking for the American dream, and therefore it shouldn't surprise you that when everybody shows up looking for the same thing and you're not organized to give it to them, when you add it up, your numbers won't look as good as places that have a more static, more manageable population. So this is not a cause to hang your head and go around thinking this is the end of the world. You just got to analyze this right and figure out what you got to do, and then figure out how to sell it. So I want to just offer a few observations about that. Most of the time I was in politics, we talked about two things. What are you going to do, and how much money are you going to spend on it? Right? Remember the debate over the president's stimulus program? How much money should we spend on it? And what are we going to do? The president said, give me about $900 billion, and I want to spend about a third on helping people pay their bills, a modest tax cut for middle class and lower income people, and unemployment extension and food stamp extension. And about a third giving the money to state and local governments so they don't have to throw a bunch of teachers and healthcare workers out of work or raise taxes. And about a third creating jobs in clean energy and highways and water and sewer and stuff like that. And then some people said, oh, that's not enough money, not as much as this economy's collapsed. And the Republicans said, no, it's too much. And besides, we think we ought to spend almost all of it in tax cuts. But they argued, what are you going to do? How much money are you going to spend on it? There was almost no discussion about the question that I think will be the most important question for the next 50 years. Which is, whatever it is you're going to do, how are you going to do it so you actually achieve what it is you're setting out to achieve? How are you going to do it? How should we take whatever money Florida has for education and spend it to deal with these problems? Whatever money you have for health care and spend it to deal with these problems. Because the more effective you are, the easier it is to get more money. Mm-hmm. People like to spend money on things that work. Now, you'll have to answer those questions. But if you want to be a leader in the 21st century, whether you're 16 or 60, you need to be able to answer the how question. Don't misunderstand me. I hope you'll all descend on the legislature and lobby for more money for education and health care. I hope you'll do everything you can. But I hope you will also keep in mind what I told you about all these other places I go. It's not just money, it's how it's spent. It's whether you're organized to make the most of the human potential that this state has. So, let me just give you a couple of examples. First of all, you can't just divide health and education and juvenile justice and all that. There's a direct connection between the fact that Florida spends the least amount of money per capita on education, but ranks 16th in incarceration, and second from the top in juvenile incarceration. These things are connected. Yet it costs more money to send people to jail than it does to educate them. So, I think you have to deal with all this together. Now, let me just give you a couple of examples from my own life, because this is what I spend my life doing now, trying to figure out, with the money I have in my foundation, is there something I can do now that I'm just a citizen and not president to make a difference in some of these areas? And I want all of you to be thinking about this, because I'm coming to what I think you should do. I organized something with the American Heart Association called the Alliance for a Healthier Generation to deal with a specific problem, the rising tide of childhood obesity and the accompanying explosion among young people of type 2 diabetes. Until 2 years ago, when the American Medical Association instructed us to stop doing it, every American who had any familiarity with this referred to type 2 diabetes as adult onset diabetes. I spoke with a young woman medical student in Washington the other night who told me that she was working her hospital rounds and met a 9-year-old girl in the Washington, D.C. area with type 2 diabetes. Year before last, we had a 9-year-old boy in Harlem, where my office is, diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. When former First President Bush and I were going all over the Gulf Coast area,